Okay, let's set the scene. It's October 13th, 1977. Lufthansa Flight 181, nicknamed the Land Chute, takes off from sunny Palma de Mallorca, heading to Frankfurt. A totally routine flight, right? Well, it never made it. Instead, this plane became the stage for a 5-day nightmare that had all of West Germany holding its breath and, believe it or not, completely changed the face of counterterrorism forever. Think about that for a second. A simple 2-hour flight that ends up lasting 5 days. We're talking a 10,000-kilometer journey from hell that just went on and on, crisscrossing continents. Everyone on that plane was pushed way past their breaking point. This wasn't just a hijacking. It was a full-blown odyssey of terror, and the entire world was watching. All right, so how on earth does a regular holiday flight turn into something like this? Let's rewind and go right back to the moment it all went wrong. So we're only about 30 minutes in the air. Inside the land chute, everything is normal, totally peaceful. You've got 86 passengers, most of them just coming back from vacation, probably feeling relaxed, looking out the window at the French coast down below. Absolutely no one had any idea that this was their last moment of calm for a very long time. And then, just like that, bam, total chaos. 4 hijackers, armed with pistols and grenades, they're suddenly in control. Their leader, a guy named Mahmoud, storms the cockpit. A voice comes over the intercom, and it's absolutely chilling. For every single person on that plane, their world just flipped upside down in a heartbeat. Okay, to really get what's happening here, we have to zoom out a bit. We need to look at the huge crisis going on back in West Germany at the time. See, this wasn't some random act of violence. No way. This was a calculated move in a much bigger, much more violent political game that had the entire country on a nice edge. So the plane makes a refueling stop in Rome, and from there, the hijackers force it to Cyprus. And it's in Cyprus that they finally lay out their demands. And they are big. They want 11 members of a group called the Red Army Faction freed from German prisons. They want 2 Palestinian allies released from Turkish jails. And on top of all that, they want $15 million. So you're probably asking, who is the Red Army Faction? Well, you might know them by their other name, the Baader-Meinhof Group. Basically, they grew out of those super radical student protests in the late 60s. They were fueled by this intense anger at Germany's post-Nazi establishment, and a really fierce opposition to what they saw as American imperialism. These weren't just protesters, though. They were a violent, far-left militant group, and their goal was nothing less than to overthrow the West German state using terror. In 1977, that was the year their campaign of terror just exploded. It got so bad that this period became known as the German Autumn, a time of intense fear and paranoia across the country. I mean, they had already assassinated a federal prosecutor and a major bank chairman. Then they kidnapped one of the country's most powerful industrialists, Hans Martin Schleyer. So hijacking the land chute, that was their endgame. It was a desperate all-or-nothing gamble to create a second massive crisis that the government simply couldn't handle, forcing them to give in. But here's the thing. West German Chancellor Helmut Schmidt had this ghost haunting him. The memory of the 1972 Munich Olympics massacre. That was a horribly botched rescue attempt, a total national humiliation. And Schmidt was absolutely determined not to negotiate, not to let that happen again. In fact, it was because of Munich that Germany created this brand new elite counterterrorism unit, GSG-9. And now, the land chute hijacking was about to become its first and its biggest test. All right, let's get back to the plane itself, because while all this political maneuvering is happening, things on the land chutes are getting seriously desperate. The longer this drags on, the more erratic and volatile the hijackers are becoming. And the passengers? They're just trapped in this hot, flying prison, completely at the mercy of their captors. This whole journey turned into what you could call a geography of desperation. It was just insane. Country after country, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Kuwait, they all said, nope, you're not landing here. They're forced to land in Bahrain, then Dubai, where they just sit on the hot tarmac for over 2 days in this crushing, unbearable heat. You can only imagine the psychological torture that was for the hostages. So just to put it in perspective, that 2-hour flight, it turned into a 10,000-kilometer nightmare. I mean, just try to put yourself in their shoes for a second. Held at gunpoint, no clue where you're going, wondering if you'll ever see your family again. And then, in Aden, South Yemen, the crisis takes an incredibly dark turn. Captain Schumann is ordered off the plane to check the landing gear. Apparently, he takes a little too long for the hijacker's taste. When he gets back on board, the lead hijacker, Mahmoud, forces him to his knees and executes him, right there in the aisle in front of everyone. This was it. The hijackers had just proved they were not bluffing. They were willing to kill. The clock had just run out. The murder of Captain Schumann, that was the point of no return. It was a brutal, cold-blooded message sent directly to the German government. Now the plane is in Mogadishu, Somalia. A final deadline has been set. Any chance of negotiating was gone. It was time to act. It was time for Operation Fire Magic. So now the lives of nearly 90 people are all resting on the shoulders of this elite unit, GSG-9. They're led by the now legendary Ulrich Wegener. 30 of his best commandos had been secretly following this plane all over the world, just waiting for the green light to go in. And there, in Mogadishu, the order finally came. And the plan they came up with? It was a masterpiece of precision and pure guts. Step 1. Somali soldiers light a huge bonfire way out in front of the plane to create a diversion, to draw the hijackers' attention. Step 2. Under the cover of darkness, the commandos sneak up to the plane's blind spots. Step 3. They blow the doors and throw in these specially designed stun grenades, meant to disorient and incapacitate the hijackers. And that gives them the few crucial seconds they need for Step 4, storm the plane. 2 a.m. The operation goes live. Flash, bang, the emergency doors blow open. Commandos are flooding into the cabin. Shots are fired. Then the call comes over the radio. Springtime, springtime. That was the code word for success. From the first explosion to that call, the entire raid was over. The plane was secure. And it all happened in just 7 minutes. Unbelievable. And while that rescue was, without a doubt, a massive triumph, the story doesn't end there. The aftermath was complicated. It was a mix of victory and real tragedy, with consequences that reached far, far beyond that tarmac in Mogadishu. So let's break down the results of Operation Fire Magic. On one hand, you have this stunningly successful raid where every single remaining hostage was rescued. An incredible victory. But it came at a very high price. When the imprisoned RAF leaders heard the news, they committed suicide. And in one final, brutal act of revenge, the RAF members still at large murdered the kidnapped industrialist Hans Martin Schleyer. Ultimately, the Landshut hijacking and that incredible rescue in Mogadishu really marked a turning point. It showed the world West Germany's new, hardline, unwavering stance against terrorism. No more negotiating. And it instantly made GSG-9 world famous. Their tactics, their training, it literally became the blueprint for elite special forces all around the globe. So in the end, the story of the Landshut is one of incredible triumph, but also deep tragedy. The success of the raid really did inspire a whole new way of thinking about counterterrorism, but it leaves us with this huge question, one that countries are still struggling with today. When you're faced with this kind of brutal terrorism, what is the right thing to do? And maybe more importantly, what price is a nation willing to pay?